the simple heuristic is a blockchain is a useful piece of technology when you have some system which is large enough to have politics, i.e., like the four of us don't have politics. The four of us have relationships, and we talk to each other. We don't have to abstract over like sort of people as a unit. But once you have a system that is large enough to have politics, so you're sort of kind of like out of the scale of everyone's like Dunbar numbers. When you have a system like that and you want integrity and correctness and liveness under the condition of everybody is engaged in this sort of like various form of sort of power conflict with each other, then a blockchain becomes a really powerful tool.
Layer 1 is a podcast and community dedicated to helping you master all things crypto. We'll be bringing you the best interviews with project executives, technical analysis for trading of the most popular cryptocurrencies, and insight into what's actually happening behind the scenes.
As you join us each episode, you're going to hear about tokens, fundraisers, investments, and even crypto conspiracies. But please remember that nothing we say should be considered financial or legal advice.
Come join us on this journey, and welcome to Layer 1.
Good morning, good evening, good night. It's another episode of Layer 1. We have a packed house in here, literally. It is four of us. I've got Dimitri with me. I've got Dean Tribble, CEO of Agoric, as well as Zaki Manian from Cosmos, as well as Occlusion. They are coming here to talk about IBC, interblockchain communication today. We're going to have a fantastic conversation. Before I get to those two, though, Dimitri, what's going on?
Hey, yeah, what's going on? I'm back. I didn't miss Layer 1 live. I am, in fact, alive. So I'm back on this interview. I'm excited, obviously have, great people that have amazing background, and they're doing great things in our crypto ecosystem. So Who do we have? Yeah,
I guess I told you guys we have Dean Tribble as well as Zaki Manian. Dean, I want to start with you. Where in the world are you, or I guess where in the galaxy are you? What's behind you? What's going on?
I'm in a small planet in the corner of the galaxy, tucked away so we can get some coding done. I am at our Agoric World headquarters in Belmont. I am the only person in this building, and everyone else is, working from their homes nearby. So there's, sunshine and green out the side there, and many screens in front of me.
Amazing. Well, we'll get right to it. Obviously, we have two of you today, and we're going to touch on Agoric. We're going to touch on Occlusion, Cosmos, Tendermint, IBC, so a ton of things to touch on. But we want to get your backgrounds first. So let's start with you, Dean, since you're ready to go for us. But what is your background? I know you have some background at Microsoft. I'd love to hear about it and how that kind of prepared you for the crypto space. And then we'll touch on Zaki.
I'll start a little earlier than that. I worked on the first production smart contract in 1989. That was after doing a bunch of secure, large-scale distributed system stuff at Xerox PARC. And so that, in some sense, had as big an impact on what I'm doing today as the later work at Microsoft. Myself, Markham, and a few others started a company called Agoric with an S, inspired by his original papers, the Agoric Open Systems papers. And that was in the 90s. That was eventually acquired by Microsoft. So I had sort of two phases of work at Microsoft. One is they acquired the secure email product that Agoric's built, and they acquired me with it. And the biggest thing that I learned about there was, partly that was, wow, you're deep embedded inside the belly of a very large beast. And while from the outside it looks like orchestrated execution and release, inside it is very deliberately a whole lot of really smart people all kind of going their own way, right? And it's like, and it's like birds flying around, and occasionally they flock together in the same direction and something impressive ships. But that particular experience is really similar to the crypto space, where there, especially, the Cosmos ecosystem now, there's lots of different companies, lots of different initiatives going in their own direction with just enough coordination that all these smart people can work together, move in the same direction, and ship something. And so that experience was actually surprisingly helpful, especially in the last, the last year or so.
Yeah, amazing. I can't wait to touch on what you guys are doing with IBC and the Cosmos ecosystem and how everything kind of works together. But Zaki, let's touch on your background as well. And let's just start from the beginning and see where we head.
Yeah. So I will. So before blockchains, I used to work on scientific and medical devices. So like embedded systems, lasers, photomultiplier tubes, biology. It's actually like very relevant knowledge to like the current COVID crisis. Also, the current COVID crisis has been like a very strong demonstration about like why I kind of got disenchanted with that whole space, because haven't done any of that stuff for like 8 years, and like the technological progress between like what I was working on in 8 years and what people are trying to use to like solve the COVID crisis is like near zero. So it's really that was kind of like why I kind of like fell out of that world. And but like one of the things that sort of resonated for me and that I discovered during that while I was working on this stuff was that, you know, one of the big things is that like software is generally terrible. And I got really interested in like, what are the things that are going on to make like more secure, more reliable, more robust software systems. So I got interested in cryptography. I got interested in BFT protocols. And I sort of started this process of founding companies and learning about this shit. And so I helped start a company called SkewChain that was looking at sort of supply chain blockchain applications and like invoice financing. And that was back in 2014. In 2017, I left and sort of got involved with a lot of different sort of public blockchain stuff. In 2018, I started working at a company called All in Bits that was, you know, the creators of Tendermint, and started and was like mostly interested in the process of like launching proof of stake blockchains. And I think probably of all the things I've worked on, like that has had like sort of the largest impact, because sort of this idea of test nets and how you do QA and doing incentivized test nets and building a validator community has sort of had like sort of outsized implications that like basically I think like every layer 1 and layer 2 protocol now sort of is following some form of that playbook from the 2018 period. And then last year was mostly about launching the CosmosHUB and sort of gearing up IBC. I left Tendermint back in February, and Occlusion has existed also since 2017 because I was always interested in running infrastructure with Tony, my co-founder, and my other co-founders, Shell and Christy. And now we are sort of, we are contributing to the Cosmos ecosystem. We are working on other chains. We are running one of the data availability group members for the Diversify Starkware DEX. So we like run infrastructure, develop technology, and do various other like weird blockchain things and non-blockchain things together. So that's kind of the state of play for me.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that introduction from both of you. We have such an awesome conversation in front of us, a complex conversation, definitely. So I kind of want to start at the base level, and I want to get this answer from both of you. But specifically, it was a question directed at Zaki during that interview in 2019. I think that question had something to do with interoperability, and you kind of brought the interviewer back and said, "Hey, why do we even build blockchains to begin with?" So I kind of want to get your answer there, as well as Dean, if you can chime in. But why do we build blockchains to begin with, and why is interoperability so key if the future is going to be filled with many blockchains?
So I guess the sort of okay, so the core thesis is blockchains are like social coordination mechanisms. Like we build blockchains because we want to have shared systems that coordinate with each other. And my basic sort of mapping is that if there is a community of people, there's going to be a tendency for them to eventually want a blockchain. If they want to have kind of like a socially scalable mechanism to coordinate with each other. Like that's what's interesting about blockchains to me. The second thing that like I think is like a relatively important point is that all blockchains are by definition interoperable with each other. they interop, like the simplest form of interoperability is you go to a centralized exchange, you sell one coin, you buy another coin, like that level of interoperability all exists. Also, you know, all blockchains are like publicly readable and publicly writable. So therefore, you know, there's more complex interoperable behavior can be built in. But the sort of core idea, and like this is kind of the bridge between, so you know, I've been familiar with the Agoric set of ideas, Markham's ideas, Mark and Dean's ideas, for probably about 5 years now. And for me, the appeal of like what I have been trying to build is, I think their sort of core ideas of safe, sovereign, distributed systems interacting with each other are like incredibly important towards making blockchain something that like the mainstream can exist, because every community actually has some boundary around it. Like you can't build a big enough tent to like include all of the human species in like a sort of like one social coordination mechanism. So what we have to have is interoperability between those social coordination systems. But there's like a flip side, which is we need to make public blockchains and shared state machines like robust, performant, and that's sort of like what motivated all of my work on like consensus protocols and building Tendermint and how do you QA these systems, is the ideas around interoperable distributed systems allow for like interaction among boundaries, between these boundaries, and like the existence of like BFT consensus protocols, et cetera, like are what makes like what's in those boundaries like robust and scalable.
Got it. Yeah. And then Dean, what is your take on this? Also, I wanted to kind of, you know, also mention right now with where we are in crypto sphere, you know, we have people that are very passionate about their own protocols and their own networks, and they tend to actually try to fix some of the issues that they have on their protocol, rather than, you know, say, hey, let's build something that's going to work with another protocol, that we can use some of the resources of that protocol and not build, you know, this to fix, you know, our side on our end, because they're very kind of, you know, passionate about their network and, you know, almost kind of like religious, right? So how do you mentioned like build a tent for everybody, right? But if those people are like, you know, very passionate about their side of things, you know, there might be some conflict there. You know, if you start, you know, doing interoperability with those things. So kind of give me a little bit of your take. How do you, you know, put these people together and also, you know, answer the question that Zaki did?
Right. Well, so let me start with sort of the dual of Zaki's answer, and then we'll get to that. Right. The thing about the social context is it's about to us, it's about enabling cooperation and making cooperation safer, right? And so you know, my model of the world in some sense starts with smart contracts, and blockchain is a latecomer to the party, right? You know, that where smart contracts are about enabling, you know, contract-like coordination that's enforced by software. And prior to blockchain, that was done with trusted third parties like, you know, Venmo and PayPal and eBay and Airbnb and all of these things. So there's, you know, upwards of $1 trillion market cap of businesses that are about coordinating between multiple third parties. And the big thing, but there, in order for me to cooperate with you, we both have to obey this particular organization's decision. And if they change it tomorrow, suddenly, you know, my Zynga game doesn't work anymore, right? And so by being able to use blockchain, where now it provides, you know, multiple computers agreeing to the state of the world and the process of computation and so forth, now I get to eliminate those trusted third parties and enable cooperation with more strangers more directly with more safety. Out of that, now that I get to engage in more easy voluntary cooperation, I'm in the world where it becomes more social in some sense, where it's now I can have a larger social group that I'm cooperating with. I can define these new groups and arrange how I'm going to participate with them. And that that now dovetails into where Zaki was focusing on. It's these social coordination. Now, necessarily, to my mind, those are going to be quite different from each other. I mean, there's just the idea of everyone consolidating on one mechanism is when we've all consolidated on one human language, then we can talk about that in that human language. But it's going to be a long time before that happens, which is to say never. And it's not necessary. I mean, the thing is, all the ways we cooperate, they're quite different, right? The rapidity of being able to play a game, where people are ducking and dodging each other versus do a payment across borders, the time frame of coordination and synchronization and safe interaction is just completely different. And there's no reason to require or believe that those should have the same exact infrastructure. We believe there are abstraction levels of communication. Just asynchronous messaging is a model that is coherent and easy to understand at different time scales and works well where you can have elements of that infrastructure that are communicating in microseconds over here and hours over there. And that's a perfectly reasonable environment to live in and coordinate with lots of different kinds of groups in. And so in some sense that speaks to the yes, people get religious about it. Occasionally, Agoric was asked when we're talking about our new model, well, what if someone picks up your ideas and steals them and just does all of your stuff? Then you can't make any money at yours. Just like, yeah, but they have their own vision, they have their own dreams, they have existing plans in a community that they've already communicated their roadmap with. Even if they thought that our idea is the next best thing since sliced bread, which it is, they still would not be able to pivot to do it because they're already on a vision quest, they're already on a dream, and they're already on producing something that we can perfectly well interoperate with, and they can perfectly well interoperate with us, as Zaki said, worst case, through an external market, but best case through protocols that we enable that make much more automated interoperation, so we can build software assured coordination between, again, another group of people that might be strangers, but now they can cooperate to produce interesting, cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of mentioned this quite a lot, what you mentioned in terms of open source and how, maybe somebody comes in and takes that idea, starts making some of their own stuff. Like, we see sometimes like sister chains and so on, right? And sometimes we can even have somebody that comes in and takes that technology and does it maybe on a private level.
Absolutely.
Which is, I'm glad you brought that up. So, Zaki, a question for you. So with that being said, like what we discussed about interoperability, where are we kind of now? At what stage are we now as far as being effective, and kind of where are we heading with that? Have we already made enough progress in where we can have interoperability efficiently? You mentioned the exchanges, right? You can kind of use the exchanges to exchange tokens and so on. That's kind of done on a centralized phase. What is kind of the next phase that you guys are looking at, maybe in the future, how it would look?
Okay, so I think really what I would like to, so I would say that like the way Dean described it, which is, this is all about can you place interoperability into the level of automation, or does it still rely on sort of centralized third parties, and how are we making progress towards here's kind of my general framework for reasoning about this, which is automation enables composability, and composability is kind of what we're aiming for, what the goal of interoperable blockchains are. And so mostly what we have seen so far is composability within a single chain. And we've sort of seen this sort of emerge.
And even that barely, yeah.
Yeah, in its early days in the Ethereum DeFi space, where there's a bunch of on the whole, relatively simple mechanisms by which things that are all operating within within an EVM environment are composing together. We also are starting to see sort of maybe some of the like again early days of the first like Bitcoin to Ethereum automations with like stuff like TBTC. All of that is super interesting. And then what we've been doing in the Cosmos ecosystem is we have been sort of very much heads down focused on what we call IBC. And what IBC is really focused on is on a couple of like sort of worlds. One is it's focused on a world of you could call them the next gen blockchains. Blockchains built on Tendermint and Cosmos SDK, things like Near protocol, things like Libra. IBC is a protocol that's intended for those systems. And it's basically a way of having sort of rich, but like organized and orderly composability between these kinds of advanced systems by like implementing like a well-specified protocol that has like a small number of pieces. Any blockchain that like then implements this protocol will be able to access this like composable ecosystem. And we're in the weeds of like how do you deal with upgrades and consensus algorithm changes and stuff like that. But one of the big milestones for the IBC protocol is we just finished Game of Zones, which was the incentivized IBC testnet, inspired by the prior work on Game of Stakes, which was our proof of stake network testnet, that basically really stress tested and more importantly created a group of people who I think who went deep into the IBC protocol, got a chance to experience it and understand it. And we started to build the ecosystem of wallets and visualizers and applications that run on top of IBC.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up this composability feature because me and Dimitri worked at ICO Alert back in the day, back when ICOs were super hot, and everybody was creating the next Ethereum killer, right? Everyone was creating this next big smart contract platform. Everybody's got the good tech, but there's still a community that needs to be built on these platforms if they are public blockchains and building user-facing applications and things like this. So what do you make of kind of the rise of all these smart contract platforms? Are there room for, obviously you guys are with IBC, so I'm guessing you think there's room for many, but what would you say to the people that think maybe most of this stuff's going to happen on Ethereum?
So I mean, Ethereum is huge in that obviously not just sort of early size, but it broke the ground of allowing user deployed smart contracts, right? I mean, Bitcoin was a smart contract, but it did just one thing, and Ethereum let participants engage and contribute their own. There are key issues with it from our perspective, from Agoric perspective, in terms of security, in terms of its its security model that is fundamentally insurmountable from my perspective, right? And in terms of its programming language, where it's great that there's a programming language there. That's really important. The world is full of many programming languages, but most of them are not known to the millions of programmers out there. And so from our perspective, it will keep going forward and it'll be with us for a very long time. But it's not something that 18 million programmers out there are going to be able to succeed at. And to get all the level of cooperation we would like across all of the communities we would like, we need a lot more engagement of programmers than I think is possible to get in that model. I mean, we talk about composability. The notable examples of composability on Ethereum are notable because frankly they're so few, right? And so you can point at them because you can count them on one hand or two hands, right? And so and that's a model problem. And I mean, yes, as the community grows, we'll get better at it and we'll get practiced at it. But fundamentally, it's just a whole lot harder than what people are doing with NPM or Ruby gems or Rust crates even. And so that's something that the systems that will gradually grow into the mainstream will need to be much more accessible than that. And that's a big part of why Agoric isn't building an Ethereum killer. Agoric is building a thing for over here in the mainstream that allows a whole lot more programmers to be able to build smart contracts, and I would like to interoperate so that everyone over on Ethereum can leverage that market. Everyone's over in that market can leverage the assets that are made in Ethereum. But I don't think that that's the route to the future in some important sense.
Amazing. Okay, so I mean, we've really broken down kind of the base layer of the conversation we want to have. So as far as the IBC goes, what are you guys trying to kind of I guess solve as far as interoperability on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis? I know you guys are working specifically within the Cosmos ecosystem, but I'd love to kind of break down the IBC and how Agoric works into that and the different entities within the IBC, kind of just a full breakdown of IBC.
Let me start there, and then Zaki can point out several other things. To me, there's several elements of interop. One is different zones in Cosmos, chains, sovereign chains, or whatever, can be implemented to provide additional function, right? The Agoric chain, the Ethereum, I mean, there's lots of these chains that aren't set up to do proof of location. But applications written on them, dApps written on them, could benefit from that. Being able to interop with a chain that provides proof of location, or proof of credentials, or proof of identity, or chain of custody, or whatever it is, being able to connect to those to leverage that function that deserves its own chain and might even be, benefit because it's layer one and it's got satellites and all this sort of stuff. Huge value, and interop gives you new functionality. Interop gives you the easy ability to innovate, where I can now take advantage of new functions that someone comes up with a year from now that none of us have thought of yet, and I can integrate it into smart contracts running on the Agoric chain in a way that's fairly painless, that gives them a market to be able to deliver their functionality to, gives us an extensibility that doesn't require major surgery and an on-chain vote, right? Then finally, our view of the world is lots of chains connected together, providing different function with different privacy regimes, with different scopes, with different communities. And so being able to bridge to private and consortium chains, and from our perspective, that are running the same computational model at a high enough level where we can just send messages to them, our assets can participate in their auctions and vice versa. Being able to make it so that no chain is an island and you can do automation across multiple chains, that is the thing that really gives you, exponential growth of the utility of this for all sorts of, cross-community cooperation and new use cases.
Yeah, I want to break down kind of the framework that Agoric runs on. But I did have this question based on that answer you just gave. How far down that rabbit hole of blockchains, when you say there's many, many chains, what are specific local communities going to have their own blockchain? Are schools going to have their own blockchain? How far down the rabbit hole are me and Dimitri going to have a blockchain to kind of interact together? How far can we go down this rabbit hole?
Well, so the answer is maybe occasionally, having it be easy for you to say this bit of computation is private and and MCX isn't quite there yet. So that just, launches our contract to hold our secret data and do a little bit of stuff for us to negotiate, including some third party we haven't met, but they're participating and we heard about them, right? So some private chain to do private transactions in the same computational model, get to some conclusion and then migrate that contract back onto a public chain. So you've locked in your commitment with each other. Totally viable kind of model. Or I've got a contract that's proceeding on chain, but some of the data is off chain. Buying off-chain securities on-chain, the transaction might be recorded in the nice high assurance log on-chain, but the details of how many shares and the pricing and all that sort of stuff, that wants to be private, so that stays off-chain, but it is acknowledged on-chain with a cryptographic hash. All that kind of stuff is a way where you might have lots of side chains and private chains supporting you. But I'm more focused on, some businesses' supply chain, right? Businesses require privacy. And so they can run a consortium supply chain for them and their 100,000 suppliers or whatever it is, and yet still interop with one supplier in another country that they have to do over a public chain, or have public commitments to deliveries so that a separate finance chain can be providing insurance, and that finance chain isn't running in their supply chain, and then they've got all sorts of insurance for all sorts of gigs, and by being able to bridge those two chains, now suddenly the high assurance of delivery can can be considered proof of, completing an insurance transaction, or proof of having done my job so I can get a accounts receivable loan, or those kinds of things. And so, there's lots of reasons to have these chains talking to each other over a public chain, even though the data is commercial, private, sensitive, HIPAA, whatever it is.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I appreciate.
I wanted to jump in with like I have a very simple set of heuristics for like how many blockchains will there be.
Let's hear it.
And the simple heuristic is a blockchain is a useful piece of technology when you have some system which is large enough to have politics, i.e., like the four of us don't have politics. The four of us have relationships, and we talk to each other. We don't have to abstract over like sort of people as a unit. But once you have a system that is large enough to have politics, so you're sort of kind of like out of the scale of everyone's like Dunbar numbers. The Dunbar number is like sort of the number of human relationships that like a single person, single primate can like hold in their head. That's sort of a term from like anthropology. And when you have a system like that and you want integrity and correctness and liveness under the condition of everybody is engaged in this sort of like various form of sort of power conflict with each other, then a blockchain becomes a really powerful tool.
In some sense, when you have competing interests is the general version of that.
Yeah. When you have entities that are collaborating and people that are collaborating, and it's too large a group to just sort of have a bunch of like bilateral relationships that manage it, a blockchain then becomes a pretty useful tool. And if we can make blockchains easy enough to use, I think that will be sort of the way of thinking about this.
And a sort of concrete characterization of that is, anytime you might think you need a trusted third party to help you with some coordination, you could potentially replace that trusted third party with a smart contract coordination on a blockchain. Right? That kind of lines up with the anytime you have politics that you have to orchestrate.
I do want to kind of get into Agoric here. You guys have that Zoe contract framework that I would like for you to break down if possible, and kind of jumping into ERTP and JavaScript and why you chose that framework for Agoric.
Sure. I might take those in reverse order. There are many languages out there that are better than JavaScript. Right. There are no languages out there that are more known, more used, and control more money than JavaScript. So 80% of the programmers on the planet can use it. The old joke of someone looking for their keys under a lamppost. It's like, well, I lost them over there, but the light's better over here. The most secure, wonderful language in the world that nobody uses doesn't help coordination and cooperation at all. And so it's crucial that it be a language that people can adopt, and the goal is to make that as good as possible, not produce the perfect system out there. Now, as an accident of history, it turns out JavaScript is more securable than most other languages on the planet, right? What happened is the language was standardized in ECMA, and the browser bindings were standardized in WC3. And if there's one thing you know about committees, my God, stepping on each other's toes is grounds for war. And so that line was enforced with a rigor that you rarely see in carefully separating the operating system user mode from system mode, right? And so the system mode is the ECMA language definition, and the user mode is the bindings into the browser. There's a separate organization that does bindings into Node, a separate organization for bindings into embedded systems and so forth. And so that made it a place where we could drive into JavaScript the hooks required for doing secure confinement of third-party code and being able to run random, I refer to Dr. Evil's Evil Emporium. I want to be able to take his software, run it in my browser, and be safe even though my private keys are there. And so JavaScript, you can do that. We've done it at Midori. I talked about two phases at Microsoft. The Midori project at Microsoft was doing that kind of secure asynchronous communication architecture based on C#, and it was a lot more work than doing it in JavaScript because JavaScript is just well suited to that. Now, I'll jump to Zoe. So that's the languaging. Why JavaScript? The answer is because that's what mainstream programmers can build, and we can make a good, secure, usable, composable system, and they know how to absorb new frameworks like React and Vue and and Angular and everything else. So Zoe was an observation as we were building. We had ERTP, Electronic Rights Transfer Protocol, and that's really a API in JavaScript or other languages, but it's an API to be able to talk about exchange and trade and business arrangements and cooperation arrangements in an object programming language. So the same APIs would work in Java or C#, but we did them in JavaScript again because of the reach and accessibility and usability. But what it means is now, instead of giving you a concert ticket by saying, okay, the number is 0x995432A, you got that, right? Write that down because that's how you're going to get into the concert. Instead, I give you an object, which is a concert ticket. And it's got a venue object, and it give me sample songs, and it lets me see the image of the stadium and a picture of my seat, and it's an object that I can interact with. I've got snippets I can render into my wallet, all those kinds of things. And that's just a much more coherent, understandable, composable model of programming that we really need to get to for millions of programmers to be able to do this stuff. And it absorbs in that architecture, it absorbs, some of the asynchrony, absorbs, it lets you have the native token, ETH or the Agoric token or what have you, exist and execute with the same code as secondary tokens or remoted tokens over IBC. So for us, an escrow exchange agent is, 25 lines of JavaScript, and that can be exchanging, ETH for peg BTC or ETH for rights to a digital painting on some other chain, and it all just works. So what Zoe is the similar observation where, right now in all these systems, the way I send you money is I don't find your name, or I don't get a reference to you, or I don't, put something in chat here. Instead, you tell me a random number and I send money to a random number, and I hope it's the right random number and that you get some money. And even the interaction with Uniswap or Compound is go through this lovely UI, figure out what all trade I want, and at the end of the day, it pops up this UI, MetaMask or what have you, or Looney or Cosmos Wallet or whatever. But it pops up a UI saying, okay, so send 400 atoms to this random number, and hope the right thing happens. Good luck with that, right? Grandma will never ever understand that, right? And that's just not a recipe for good UX. You explain that to UX people and they go, and you wonder why there aren't many UX people paying attention to crypto, because you're just way off in the weeds. And so the model in Zoe is both more usable and vastly more safe, right? It's that businesses don't just throw money at each other. And people don't just throw money, well, sometimes they do, right? They throw money at each other. But mostly, I will give you, it's quid pro quo. I will give you this money if you give me this painting. I will give you this money if you ship this package, right? And you give me a commitment to ship this package. And you won't get the money until the package arrives, right? And so Zoe builds that into our smart contract framework in our library. So it builds on ERTP, but now instead of saying, here's some money, and then you will turn around and say, okay, here's your concert ticket, which works. And that's, better than what you can do in current smart contract frameworks. But instead what happens is I say, here's an offer of this money, which is attached, in exchange for that concert ticket. And the money goes into escrow systematically inside of Zoe. The smart contract runs knowing the money's available. All I need to do is provide what that offer wants, which is the concert ticket. And now the contract can do whatever it wants. It knows that money's available. And when the seller comes in and says, here's a concert ticket, as long as you give me this much money, now it knows that the concert ticket is available, but no misbehavior by the smart contract can steal the money or take the concert ticket and go to it themselves, right? So you've got this incredible safety of knowing that that bugs in the code or malicious behavior in the code can't compromise you. The only thing it can decide to do is whether to refund your money or give you the thing you wanted, right? And so every client of a contract, and this, as they start to compose and stack with each other, every layer of every client of a contract has the trivial assurance that they will either get what they wanted or get their money back. And reducing that risk, separating that risk, and providing systemic protections there. Now suddenly I, as a mid-range programmer trying to roll out a cool concert ticket management system, I'm just a lot safer, because even bugs can't accidentally steal money from my customers, right? Even a malicious attacker that found a way in the back door and stole my keys and hacked my house or whatever can't steal money from my customers. And so I'm in a much more comfortable place to be able to roll out new things, to be able to roll out innovations, to be able to respond to changes in my marketplace, to be able to borrow a library from someone else that probably is good, but might have bugs. I didn't write it, but now suddenly I'm not exposing my customers to the risk of theft because I bought the cool Dr. Evil's, trading mechanism. Right?
Yeah,
so
no,
those are some of the elements of it.
No, that sounds amazing. I wanted to also ask you, and thank you for breaking that down in a very good detail. Does your side get affected? Let's say, kind of talking about the interoperability, where we have, let's say, certain upgrades that happen on networks. You kind of mentioned, I think Zaki mentioned, when upgrades kind of happen and certain changes happen on networks, you have to be able to make sure that the whole interoperability works. We have Ethereum that's kind of switching to proof of stake right soon. We have constant upgrades that happen on different protocols. How do you guys tackle a challenge of constantly evolving that side of crypto network?
Same way we always have, Pinky. Encapsulation, really. I mean, there are two things: encapsulation and extensibility. So IBC abstracts sort of best practices for interoperating between chains, where each side has a light client, and there's absolutely upgrade concerns about if chain X changes how they represent headers, then all of the chain Ys that talk to it need to upgrade their light client to follow and understand the new headers. But that's at the IBC layer. At the application, that's at the IBC, what we call the TAO layer, the transport, authentication, and ordering layer. And just like, TCP and HTTPS changed, right? It changed multiple times over the last decade. And yet, HTTP was largely unaffected, right? I mean, maybe a little bit. And certainly application protocols, AJAX protocols, JSON protocols across HTTP changed not at all. Right, and so the same thing in IBC, where the underlying, if a consensus algorithm on a chain changes, then the light clients change, but the IBC articulation, how you set up channels, doesn't change at all. App protocols built on IBC don't change at all. And so the transfer protocol, to be able to generically transfer assets in IBC between chains, or between zones, or between parachains or the Ethereum or whatever it is, that won't change even as the light client changes. There will be light client upgrade care that you need to have in order to preserve the semantics of app protocols and channels. But once you do so, then the application code doesn't change at all. Now the extensibility part, and this is where, early days in interop, right? Was the old joke when phone, I mean, not even a joke, when phones first came out, there were people quoted as saying, these are really exciting. Someday there will be a phone in every town, right? And it's one of those things where until there's somebody to talk to, connectivity doesn't have as much value as it might appear. But with IBC, with Interop, one of the main things it enables is innovation, right? Where now someone can come up with something new, and now there's people to talk to. That requires that those people to talk to are able to deploy new code to talk to them. And so that means that Interop plus a smart contract platform, Agoric or CosmosHUB or any of these things, plus a smart contract platform, where now, without a change to the underlying hub, I can rapidly and permissionlessly deploy my new chain and a counterparty on the hub, or a counterparty on ETH, or a counterparty on Agoric, or whatever it is, in order to engage in my business and app protocol. That will enable new innovation to leverage interoperability to roll out new functionality. Again, permissionlessly, easily, see what takes, and then people can adopt it more broadly.
Yeah, that was a fantastic breakdown of both Agoric and IBC. Zaki, I wanted you to touch on CosmosHUB, as well as kind of what we talked about pre-episode with you guys kind of launching Stargate here. And then we'll jump out and talk macro crypto markets and things like that.
Yeah. So the hot topic of the CosmosHUB ecosystem right now is this upgrade that we're calling Stargate. And normally, so I would be the first person to be like a proponent against naming your blockchain upgrades.
Why is that?
Because like, if you name something, it puts a giant target on its back, and it's like something to criticize. It's something to be opposed to. It does seem like a little bit of marketing hype. I think that, to a certain extent, protocol evolution for most blockchains that aren't trying to be like sort of eternally stable, which is, the sort of niche that Bitcoin holds. Upgrades are just part of life and part of the day, and they don't need like special names. But the reality of the situation is, and sort of like a little bit of the story came here is, as we sort of geared up for Game of Zones, I started to look at like, okay, like what are we actually going to have to pull a Game of Zones version out of this, out of like the sort of master branch of Tendermint and the Cosmos SDK and IBC. What are we going to have to do? And I was like, oh, there's a lot of changes here that are not just IBC. So, and they represent really like a lot of the sort of hopes and dreams and really work from a distributed dev team across, 8 or 9 different organizations over the last, year. And so the reality is, to get to IBC, we got to bring them all together, and it has a lot of impacts on the Cosmos ecosystem. So the sort of high order of Stargate is IBC. Stargate is instant node sync for Tendermint and Cosmos nodes. So right now we make blocks relatively quickly on the CosmosHUB at roughly every 6 to 7 seconds. And we could be making them faster. And one of the reasons why we don't make them faster is sync takes forever. Syncing a CosmosHUB node from nothing takes days. And so we have this instant node sync feature. And then the sort of other big thing is, and this kind of, I believe, really gets at the heart of what makes Cosmos special, which is we really, really want Cosmos to be appealing to mainstream developers. And that, is part of the appeal of JavaScript. But a lot, like every blockchain probably largely exposes a set of like non-standard programming interfaces that programmers have to learn in order to interface with that blockchain. And that provides like a huge barrier to somebody whipping up an application or an integration or prototyping an idea like over the weekend. And what we've been doing is we are migrating all of the Cosmos data structures and interfaces to the protobuf system of serialization. So everything in Cosmos is going to be represented as a protobuf, which is going to make it really easy to integrate with other languages, et cetera, and sort of fulfill our dreams of that. But because there is so much churn in sort of the sort of core representations of data structures, every wallet, exchange, block explorer, et cetera, is probably going to feel a little bit of change in their Cosmos Hub integrations. And the Cosmos Hub is widely integrated across a variety of different ecosystems. And so we've gone with this like named upgrade and this very deliberate process of test nets and going to all of the people that we integrated and making sure that we're in a position to hold their hand through this process too. And that's why we sort of picked the name Stargate, because this is very much kind of like stepping through a gateway into the cosmos. And so we put out a blog post on the Figment blog on the 22nd of June. That was like the first kind of overview, and you can expect more and more stuff coming from various entities within the Cosmos team about like what Stargate entails. But at the other side of that, we're expecting sort of the Stargate process to like kick off in early August in earnest, and hopefully be done in like sort of September, October timeframe, to be really enabling a very large sort of leap forward of the whole Cosmos ecosystem.
I want to second the thing that Zaki said about the innovation thing, and make the point that Zaki's actually the one that pointed out how important in early stages interop is to innovation as opposed to merely just connecting systems. And so this is the next step along that path of making it easier to do rapid innovation, to be able to easily identify product market fit, integrate new contenders into an ecosystem, so that the barrier to entry of new ideas and new approaches and new chains is reduced.
Got it. Yeah. What how much time does the ecosystem itself have like to upgrade into the changes that are required for Stargate? Like you mentioned that it's obviously might be impact some some of the things like wallets and so on, right? How much time are you given, to make sure that things are going to be set up right?
So what I would say the goal of the Stargate team is actually to kind of go through pretty much our entire ecosystem and actually go and say, okay, are you like work with them to make sure that they're upgraded and basically know that we have like a good version of their software and their integration that they would be ready to switch on. And like, we want to come back to the Cosmos Hub with a definition with like an artifact, that basically says like, look, we went to the ecosystem. We've worked with them. We've gotten their sign off to say, yes, we are Stargate ready. And like only then should the Cosmos Hub upgrade. And if, if we can't get in touch with people or we can't get the attention, then we'll flag that to the Cosmos Hub and be like, look, we put weeks of work into trying to get this integration to go through the process, and we're not able to get it done. And then ultimately the decentralized governance of the Cosmos Hub is going to have to decide on the timing of the Stargate upgrade. Gotcha.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. So let's zoom out. We've covered a lot about interoperability, Cosmos, all these things. Zoom out and let's look at the industry, as a big picture, kind of where things are. I want to get your takes on things like that are going on right now with DeFi, with DAOs and ecosystems. Right now DeFi is going like crazy. There's crazy stuff going on as far as DeFi on Ethereum. We can
start a whole new episode.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of from the big picture, like what do you guys see right now that's going on with the NFTs and the DeFi that's growing pretty rapidly? What are your opinions about those sectors?
So one of the things that I think that was like one of my big theses of 2020 was that like in general, permissionless access to tokens is going to sort of return as a major theme. And permissionless access and like more experimentation, like sort of we've had this like, how do you build up stakeholders in your network? You build up stakeholders in your network by selling tokens, usually through some sort of like, exchange or other mechanism. I think largely we're starting to run out of steam on that mechanism, and it largely doesn't produce a compelling group of token holders. I think what we're seeing with liquidity mining on Ethereum and what I'm expecting to see liquidity mining, like I'm expecting liquidity mining to be a big thing and be like expand beyond the Ethereum ecosystem and basically be part of the larger interchain story. But like we are seeing more and more experimentation with mechanism design around how you build up stakeholders, how do you build up communities, et cetera, in your network. And that I think is an incredibly healthy process. And people should just, and like, hopefully that will be more of the story of what's going on with blockchains. And I think it's a huge opportunity to sort of expand the size of our communities and expand the group of people that are working with it.
Right. I'm really excited about what I see in that space as well. And Zaki and I have been talking a lot about it. We will be rolling out a new public chain, and we'll be talking a lot more about that in the not too distant future. But this issue of proof of stake is you've got to show up with your money and then you get tokens. We want to be a chain that's really accessible to the builders. It's really accessible to JavaScript developers, the people who build all of these, web services and web applications and websites. And so having a permissionless model that they can get in and get involved and get, ownership and sense of it being their place, that's huge value. And so seeing what people, like Compound's recent thing is exciting, largely because to me, largely because of of the novelty around how they did the permissionless distribution of a bunch of their tokens. And so, yeah, I think that's a big deal. DeFi is also great and very interesting, but the meta stuff has in some sense even more important legs for the future.
Yeah, one of the conversations me and another co-host Mike were having on our weekly news segment on Mondays was the stickiness aspect of what's going on with DeFi, and maybe the lack of stickiness, if I'm saying it correctly. Because what actually happens is you have these users that are apparently chasing yield. So when it comes to maybe being a user of synthetics, they might not really be a power user of synthetics. They're actually a power user just because of that yield. And when it goes to another platform and it's kind of the race to the bottom there for people offering yield, maybe you start to have subsidizing of the yield that again synthetics and Ren are already doing. So what do you make of the stickiness of these users? I know you touched on user adoption and building a community. What do you make of the stickiness around growing a user base through DeFi, if
Let me
there is
start with
yield?
a small thing, and then Zaki can give a much deeper answer. From our perspective, my focus is on the mainstream. A lot of these, DeFi is really rich and evolving, and we're all going to learn a lot from it. But a lot of the value is based on speculative future value of what some of these tokens will be worth when someone finds mainstream or real applications. And there's certainly some real applications on blockchain, but compared to mainstream application size, they're still very, very small. And so a lot of the speculation is about what it will all mean as that grows to encompass more of the ways that people do business or cooperate or what have you. And so the risk you're talking about remains until it starts to get connected with mainstream use cases and mainstream, large numbers of folks and daily usage, at which point it becomes more and more anchored to reality. And so you're not just simply chasing liquidity or chasing the place where someone will promise to do shifting of future shares. You're chasing actual, value streams that tie to value production. And that's where we all have to get to. Question of how quickly we get there is obviously the important one. So a lot of our focus is how do we get there, and when we want to enable DeFi along the way because we connect into it and learn so much of it and power economics towards it. But the future has to be getting there. It has to be improving the velocity of shipping and reducing cost, which is worth trillions of dollars a year. You can do a hell of a lot of speculation when you enable trillions of dollars a year in transaction to be more efficient, right? And that will power not just speculative DeFi, but real, actual leveraged engagement, and all of the education people are getting will be relevant to that.
I think this represents like one of the things that I think is like the area that is like richest for experimentation, which is essentially that I think we basically have this understanding that if you get a wide distribution, some percentage of users are going to be sticky. And like that is the I think that's the best way of reasoning about this that we have so far, that like if you sort of have like a wide cone of is there's going to be a yield on it. And I think with these new mechanisms we're still trying to understand what that yield is. I think all of these things are inherently better than sell coins to VCs and have those VCs sort of dump on retail.
Good point.
Like it's I think it's hard to think of a single thing that is probably like I think it's in all likelihood this is the worst possible way to build something. So I think we have to like sort of like innovation is good. Yeah. Innovation is good.
Yeah, I think I get your point. I mean, it's better to have a net to bring those users in than to not have the net at all, and then you can figure out that situation afterwards. So I didn't mean to step in front of you there, Dima. What question do you have next?
I love how Dean you talked about the velocity of money. That's I love that concept, and with my finance background, that really strikes to heart in terms of like how things are, and how if you increase the velocity of money and or velocity of movement overall in general, that is huge industry there. I wanted to kind of like, as we're kind of wrapping up already, I want to ask you guys, given where we are now, globally, right? And kind of things are slowing down. Maybe, you know, velocity of money, maybe the velocity of movement, you know, is slowing down globally because of, you know, just economic issues and certain things that are happening in different countries. You know, some countries are experiencing huge inflations, hyperinflation, so on, right? And all these things were supposed to be basically kind of point people into direction of Bitcoin, right, as a hedge for inflation or some of these economic issues that are happening, you know, all over the world. But, you know, we have this kind of recipe, perfect recipe for crypto, for Bitcoin, let's say, for preserving value to hedge against inflation. But we haven't really seen Bitcoin really pick up in demand or pick up in price, you know, that much just yet. You know, it seems like people that are in those distressed countries seem to like to drop their currency maybe to get into dollar rather than, you know, Bitcoin and so on, right? So it seems like this was a perfect recipe for Bitcoin, and we're kind of seeing some of the lack of you know, demand for it. Is it maybe because of the onboarding tools that are available in those countries? You know, is it something else? What are you guys' opinion of like where we are now globally, and kind of, is this the right time for crypto to really grow much faster, or is this something that's going to, you know, temper the growth of crypto and BTC adoption, maybe as a inflation hedge from these you know, distressed countries?
One thing to understand is, like, in general, these things take time, and trying to like snapshot them at any given instant of time and being like, oh, this is the trend, is probably going to miss the forest for the trees. Like, the short answer is crypto performing, not performing, interesting, not interesting during this period of unprecedented global economic as far as I'm concerned, like, jury is still out. Who knows? Short term, what we've seen is some like small sized banking systems just collapse in crypto and in the world, and the impact of those small sized banking systems collapsing on the cryptocurrency market has been negligible. Which is interesting, but I don't necessarily know how much to infer from it, other than like, you know, people are going to like, so, you know, we all worked with the Open Money Initiative along some of their initial sort of studies and analysis of like, and they focused on Venezuela as like, how do people function in a currency regime that has like essentially collapsed? And, you know, crypto plays a part in that, in sort of the current world order, but it doesn't necessarily overwhelmingly dominate. But people find a way to kind of to create functioning economies around in collapsing currency and regimes, and in collapsing banking regimes. And I think, as a practical matter, we just have to kind of like wait and see to see how this is going to play out. And like what the long-term impacts are going to be on cryptocurrencies.
There is a non-trivial usability thing. So, you know, it's from the technology side, it is really hard to see how big the gap is. You have companies like, you know, Cello going out and spending a lot of time in third world countries to figure out how they think about their money, and it's different than us, right? Their situation and what they would need to do to protect their money from it just being taken by the bully next door or whatever it is. I mean, it's just you know, until you actually look at that, what you need to do to solve those problems is not just the technology of the money underneath, but it's taking it all the way out to the use case. And, you know, it's my store of value. Can I buy a house with it? Well, turns out you can in one place in one country, but, you know, do it generally? Maybe not, right? So from a risk aversion point of view, was it John Oliver said, you know, it combines everything I don't understand about money with everything I don't understand about software, you know, and so, someone just sent me that quote, so I just had to pull it out. You know, and so it is better. It is the future that we need to end up with, but it's not there yet. And a big part of it not being there yet is we need to engage, you know, all of the developers solving all of the problems, so that this is part of their toolkit, so that they can bridge the gap from us to the users. because that's going to be different for every use case and different for every person. It's got to be the wallet, my handheld app that all that everyone is grabbing on their phones for doing their brokerage and portfolio management. That thing's just got to have, cryptocurrency is one of the things they can muck with, right? And then it starts to feel routine for that tiny fraction of the populace that has handheld apps that can manage their finances, right? Which is awesome and wonderful, and still a tiny fraction of the populace. So there's just a long way to go, but progress. We're on the right track, but it's a long way to go.
Awesome. And we're all hoping that we do go down that path sooner rather than later. But you guys are doing great work in pushing that forward. So we appreciate it. Guys, this has been a fantastic discussion. We're going to let you drop the links as far as Agoric and Occlusion and CosmosHUB. But one last question we always have for our guest is a book recommendation. It could be crypto, it could be non-crypto, fiction, nonfiction. What is both of your book recommendations for the viewers and listeners out there?
I can go first. Well, I don't know. The book that was on my mind for the last is there was this beautiful Foundation trilogy or Foundation trailer that was on during the Apple WWDC announcement. So I was rereading the Wikipedia pages for all the Foundation novels and remembering back to my childhood reading that. So this is actually a great. This is a great time to be catching up on the golden age of science fiction, because we have the Foundation series on Apple coming. We have the new Dune movie. Dune is my favorite book ever.
Oh, wow. Yep. Same. For me, it's kind of short-term pragmatic. The economists we work with at RMIT University for our economy design and token design and that sort of thing, they published a book called Unfreeze, which is how to create a high growth economy after the pandemic. And they're coming from a different place in economics, same way that we're kind of coming from a different place in computer security, that really thinks about, how do you enable more people to have more choices in creating better economies and better cooperation. So it's sort of the economic equivalent of our general perspective. And here it's very focused on, what are pragmatic things that regulators, economies, bankers, those kinds of things should think about in order to really restart a high-powered economy. And since that's the world I want to live in, I want people to look at this in order to take some of these recommendations to heart. So it's a very short-term, near-term, socially selfish thing to do.
Yeah, awesome. Great recommendations. As we said, it was a great episode. Interoperability can often be a tough subject to cover in 1 hour, but I think we did a great job. But drop your guys' links as far as where to find you, as well as the companies and platforms you're working on, and then we'll head off here.
Yeah, Occlusion.io, Twitter, ZMANIAN, Agoric.
Right. At Agoric, AGORIC, and agoric.com. And you can get to everything from there.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We appreciate it. And we'll definitely have you guys on again, maybe 6 months down the line. We'll see you on Layer 1 again. Thank you for coming on the episode.
That'll be great. Thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to check out Layer 1 on all the audio and video platforms listed in the description. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next week.